Hi, I'm Richard Fung. I'm a film video maker and I'm as not young as Honor. So the 6 slides will work for me, so I'll show you a 2-minute clip in a second. I was honored but a bit surprised to be asked to present in a conference on blackness. But then when I look back at my work, I realized that actually blackness is a constant in all of my work. Whether it's the most recent film that I did, which uses the Caribbean roti as a way of looking at indentured labor in the Caribbean, the migration of South Asia to the Caribbean, and then Caribbean migration here. Once you deal with indentureship, you have to look at slavery. You have to deal with that présence africaine in the Caribbean. It's also present in the work I did with my mother, which is a work that explores the consciousness about race and gender and class in the Caribbean. In the colonial Caribbean that she was born into, she was born in 1909, as well as a post-independence era. And so again, blackness is central to that work, even the work looking at my Chinese mother. It's present in the work I did with Christopher Cozier, whose Kaiser-inflected lens has really helped me to re-understand the Caribbean that I grew up with. And Christopher, of course, is one of the people at the center of Alice Yard, and I'm going to write him to tell him to expect a lot of requests for residencies at Alice Yard. And then finally, it's at the core also of the most recent project that I'm doing, which is in 1984 I did my first video, which is called Orientations, Lesbian and Gay Asians. And even in that project, I'm looking at constructions of ethnicity and race as relational. And when you look back, forced to look back at that work now 30 years earlier, I realized that the presence of all of those founders of our communities, including Makeda Silvera, Doug Stewart, are present in that work. I think most of my work is really inspired by the kind of move that I made from Trinidad and Tobago to Toronto and the kinds of insights that I've had around looking at questions of ethnicity and race and the construction of those between those two spaces, what the truths about those understanding and deconstructing the truths of race in those two spaces. And in both of those sites, I think that our identities and our histories are plotted along intersecting vectors of settler, indigenous, Orient, West, and black and white. And that race and ethnicity are really relational. And for me, it's important to look at the way in which our histories, and in case of my family, the Caribbean families intertwine with themselves, right? I'm going to show you a clip from a video I made in 1991. It's called Out of the Blue. And it seems to me that this deals with two meanings of the term state. One, state as an organized political community under a government, and state as a kind of a present condition. And when I was looking at this, I also was reminded in 1991 I was on the first Committee for Racial Equality in the Arts in the Canada Council, which a number of us, including people like Bessie Phillip and others, had been working to change the state of the state and the state's arts organizations at that time. So how do I press play? I'm still. I should know this, I teach here. Oh, there. Thanks.
Smallmouth bass, I've caught largemouth bass, I've caught walleye, I've caught muskie, I've caught sunfish, I've caught pickerel, and So altogether, over the 4 years I've been here, I've caught maybe 7 fish in total. I think nature has the effect of calming me down. I think what I enjoy most about being up here is the serenity.
Early 90s video music. In doing this film, I was really interested in creating a space in which Julian's story could be heard, which is why I chose to start it in this way, in which I tried to shake up what people thought they knew about Canada and what they thought they knew about Black people, which is that the English Canadian identity is so much located in this notion of the landscape, and at that time, particularly the discourse around Black youth was as inner city, which is why I chose to start with this way, but I didn't make up the story. Julian, that was actually, was shot at Julian's cottage, and that was actually his best friend. I didn't have this surrogate Chinese person in there. I knew Julian's family is actually Trinidadian, but I came to know them because we were all, he, his mother, and his brother were all in the same karate dojo. And I believe when I look back at this story, that Julian was able to get an apology from the police because of a number of factors. One was that he's an exceptional person. He was an A+ student at the University of Toronto. He was a star athlete. He was religious. He also came from a middle-class family. And so his family had middle-class skills to deal with the police. His mother was incredibly eloquent and did interviews, as was he. And his family was also connected to Black activism in the city. Lennox Farrell who was one of the leading activists around police violence, was a family friend. Yet, of course, in the intersection of race and class, we know that it doesn't always work in people's favor. And in fact, one of the things that Julian said in the interview was that his father was arrested by Montreal police precisely because he was driving a Lincoln Continental, and that was seen to be not appropriate for a Black man. And of course, when I thought of that, saw this again, and I looked at this video, it echoed right back to Clem Marshall's case in his arrest in 2009 for driving a Nissan Altima, a case that was just resolved last year. What I discovered many years later, after this was shown on TV and there was a large forum that was organized, was in fact the police tried to dissuade Vision TV from showing the film. And Rita Devil hadn't told me. I don't know what she thought I would do, but she didn't tell me until many years later that we tried to not have this film show. Julian Denny is now professor of medicine at Boston University. I looked up his faculty page, and he's a still handsome man, but he's got gray in his beard after the 23 years since the making of this film. In 1991, the term racial profiling for my research was actually just coming into circulation. It was first being used. And here we are 23 years later, in which the police are still resisting calls to deal with the question of racial profiling. So the question that came to me, if you asked to think of questions, was how long does a state last? And what does it take to change a state? Thank you.